Okay, good day everyone. Today we're going to discuss the composition of the Senate and the House of Representatives. Particularly, we're going to focus on the party list, the selection of the party list representatives. But before we go to that, let's just look at the composition of the Senate. We find in Section 2 of Article 6, the Senate shall be composed of 24 senators who shall be elected at large by the qualified voters of the Philippines as may be provided by law. So how are they chosen? They are elected at large, meaning in a national election. It means everyone in the Philippines gets to vote, all 24 senators. Of course, in our case, we vote 12 each for every election, so that there's a transition. So if you look here, this is our current senators. So what does this mean? This actually symbolizes our country as a nation because since they're elected at large, that's what our senators are. They're a sampling of how we are as a nation. This is how we think. This is how we believe that we should decide our laws, our policies, and we elected these senators to think for us as a nation, as against our House of Representatives, we'll see they are chosen in a different manner. If you look at Section 5 of the Constitution, the House of Representatives shall be composed of not more than 250 members unless otherwise provided by law. Could it be more than 250? Yes, if it is provided by law. Could it be less than 250? Yes, as long as it is provided by law. At present, how many members of the House do we have? We have 305, 243, which is 80% of the district representatives, and party list 61, which represents the 20%. You'll see how where we got that percentage later. It's a total of 304 because someone died. I think a party list representative died. So what is the composition of the House? The House members shall be elected from legislative districts apportioned among the provinces, cities, and the metropolitan Manila area in accordance with the number of respective inhabitants and uniform and progressive ratio. And those, of course, the second part is your party list representative. Those who, as may be provided by law, shall be elected through a party list system of registered national, regional, and sectoral parties or organizations. So these underlined words are the crucial words that we'll see in the cases that will be discussed under these sections. So as you can see, as mentioned earlier, the senators represent us as a nation. Meanwhile, our House of Representatives gives us a different kind of sampling. So of course, the legislative district, it samples our nation in a geographical manner. So obviously, it's common sense that people who live in the same area would have the same interests. For example, people in Mindanao have different interests from people in the Metro Manila. People in Metro Manila have different interests from that probably in Ilocos. So the House of Representatives provides different sorts of representatives from all parts of the country. And on the other hand, the party list system was introduced to provide a better depth in the kind of sampling of our nation in the House of Representatives. It provided for national, regional, and sectoral parties. It provides a different view or ideology in the House of Representatives. For example, there's enough number of youth who could form a party and be elected. They could have their say in what our laws will be. So ideally, that's what our legislative is. They determine where we will go. They direct us, they provide what goes, what's the rule, what is allowed, what is considered a crime. And who decides that? It's supposed to be the people, but of course it would be chaos for everyone to dictate what the law will be. So we elect our representatives in the Senate and in Congress. So actually, if you want to know what kind of a nation we are, you look at your congressmen and your senators, that's the kind of nation we are. So if you're not happy with it, well, you have no choice. We are a democratic Republican country, one person, one vote. If you don't want the kind of politicians or legislators that you have, it's really a matter of making sure that you vote and or trying to explain to people what these representatives mean or what it means to vote a senator or a congressman. When you vote for someone there, you should be able to say that that person I voted there will think exactly like me. When you're faced with an issue like anti-terror, abortion, or any health issues, the senator I voted or the congressman I voted will think and decide as I would decide. So hopefully you guys would register so that you could provide a better kind of legislators that we'll have in the future. So that's the type of members in the House of Representatives. Moving on, how do we select them? The party list representatives shall constitute 20% of the total number of representatives, including those under the party list. 80% district, 20% party list. And then the second part is merely at the transition provision wherein the first terms after the 3 consecutive terms after the ratification of the Constitution, since probably the law on party list has not yet been developed, the Constitution provided for the selection or election of labor, peasant, urban, poor, indigenous, cultural communities, women, youth that could participate in Congress. What is the formula to determine how many seats are there for the party list? So initially, what's available is how many districts there are. So the given number usually would be how many district representatives. Let's say there are 250 district representatives. From there, the formula would be district representatives plus 20% of X, X being the total number of House of Representative members. So 250 plus 0.20X equals X. And then 250, and then you transpose 0.20X to the other side. We'll have 250 equals X minus 0.2X. And then we'll have 250 equals 8.8X. And then if you put back 0.8 to the other side so that you'll have X on remaining on the other side, you'll have 250 divided by 0.8. So that's basically your formula. The number of district representatives divided by 0.8 would be your total number of members of the House of Representatives. So how many party lists are there? Well, it's simple. Since you already have the total number of members, you just multiply that by 20%. So if you have 312.5 members of the House times 0.20, you have 62.5 party list representatives. So merong kalahating congressman lang, or I don't know what that, meron namang manananggal sa Congress, so probably that's it. Okay, so who could be members of the House as a party list representative? Those who, as provided by law, and the law that governs party list is RA 7941, who, as provided by law, shall be elected through a party list system of registered national, regional, and sectoral parties or organizations. So that's paragraph 1 of section 5. Now, if you look at the law that created the party list system, you'll find the different aspects that we're going to take up in this lecture. First, we'll take up registration and accreditation. So, of course, we'll take it in a chronological manner. So where does it start? It all starts with registration and accreditation. You'll find it in section 5 of RA 7941. Then after a party list or a party is accredited, you get to nominate a representative, which would be section 8 and 9. And then, of course, after you submit a list of nominees, you get to participate in the election, and If you have enough votes, you'll be allocated seats, which is provided in Section 11. And then after that, we'll have a brief discussion on the COMELEC and each jurisdiction. So we'll start with registration and accreditation. So it all starts with that. Section 5 provides who may register. So any organized group of persons as a may register as a party organization under the party list system. How? By filing with the COMELEC. When? Not later than 90 days before the election. So this is usually around mid of February. And then what do you file? File a verified petition by its president or secretary stating its desire to participate in the party list system as a national, regional, or sectoral party. And then, what sectors may register? So this portion of the law created confusion, provided that the sectors shall include labor, peasant, fisherfolk, urban poor, indigenous cultural communities, elderly, handicapped women, youth, veterans, overseas workers, and professionals. So it's the interpretation of what sectors or what kinds of groups may participate or register as a party list. So one of the earlier cases regarding registration is Ang Ladlad. In Ang Ladlad, you have the petitioner arguing that the LGBT community is a marginalized and underrepresented sector that is particularly disadvantaged because of their sexual orientation. So it wants to have a representation in Congress. But then COMELEC dismissed its application, stating that consensual partnerships or relationships by gays and lesbians who are already of age advocate sexual immorality. So that's the reason why COMELEC denied the application of Ang Ladlad. So the case reached the Supreme Court with an issue that whether or not Ang Ladlad is qualified to participate in the party list system. According to the Supreme Court, the list provided in Section 5 is not exclusive. The enumeration is not exclusive, and the crucial element is not whether a sector is specifically enumerated, but whether a particular organization complies with the requirements of the Constitution or RA 7941. Next, does Ang Ladlad have vast representation? So primarily, of course, the reason why you get to be represented in Congress, whether as a party list or as a district representative, is that you represent enough number of people. So in this case, it was pointed out that there's an LGBT community that's estimated to constitute 670,000 persons. So that's more than twice the number of a district that is entitled to one representative. So the court said, what more should Ang Ladlad be entitled to participate in the party list election? And then the court also addressed if it is constitutional to use religious beliefs as basis for exclusion. Of course, the court pointed out that according to the non-establishment clause of the Constitution, it calls for the government neutrality in religious matters. Clearly, governmental reliance on religious justification is inconsistent with the policy of neutrality. And how about public morals? May COMELEC reject an application based on public morals? Well, in this case, the court said that COMELEC failed to justify its position that petitioners' admission into the party list system would be so harmful as to irreparably damage the moral fiber of society. Next is your Magdalo case. Magdalo sa Pagbabago, which is headed by Antonio Trillanes. And at that time, they were filing for a petition for registration. But the COMELEC denied the petition, stating that the participation of their chairman and some members in the takeover of the Oakwood Premier Apartments, wherein several innocent civilian personnel were held hostage, was an act of violence. In this case, it was Magdalo was actually applying for registration. The court discussed here the steps for a party list to be able to participate in the party list election, which is the two-step process is registration and accreditation. Registration merely bestows juridical personality. It acknowledges the existence of the group. But the accreditation is the portion wherein COMELEC grants that group the privilege to participate. Initially, the court agreed with COMELEC not to let Magdalo to participate in the party list election due to the fact that Magdalo opted to seize a hotel occupied by civilians. They marched in the premises in full battle gear with ammunitions and plant explosives in the building. They actually held hostage people. And these are clear acts of violence. But in time, there was an amnesty that was granted to the Magdalo soldiers. Given that amnesty, the court said that to still sustain the finding that Magdalo employs violence or other harmful means would be inconsistent with the legal effects of amnesty. So if they would insist on ruling that Magdalo is a group that employs violence, it would counter the effect of the goal of peace and reconciliation. But just to address the concern, the court said, should Magdalo decide to file another petition for registration, its officers must individually execute affidavits renouncing the use of violence or other harmful means. So we go to the important case, which is Atong Paglaom. Atong Paglaom ultimately addresses the concern on whether those who will participate in the party list election are limited to sectoral representatives or sectors such as the labor, peasant. Should they be underrepresented or the marginalized? Or should we follow Section 5, Paragraph 1, which states that those who may participate in the party list system are those who are registered national, regional, and sectoral parties. So in Atong Paglaom, the court finally said that the party list system is not exclusively for sectoral representation. So it is not synonymous to sectoral representation. Sectoral and non-sectoral parties may participate. And these are the ones that cannot expect to win in legislative district elections, but they can garner in nationwide elections at least the same number of votes. So as mentioned earlier, district representatives are the ones selected by geographically. But these groups who cannot expect, given that the nature of our politics, usually districts are already dominated by certain people, certain families, or certain parties. But if a certain group has enough number and they want to be represented in Congress, they should be allowed under the party list system. So the policy is to give the marginalized and underrepresented both in economic. So underrepresented economically or ideologically, meaning it's not about being poor. It may be something that your ideology is not there in Congress. That particular group's opinion on things is not represented in Congress. But there's enough of you, and that means you should be entitled to a seat in Congress. To summarize, Atong Paglaom, it stated that it's not only sectoral that can participate in the party list election. National parties and regional parties could also participate. So national and regional parties need not be organized along sectoral lines. So it does not have to be PDP youth or women. They could be simply political parties and join the party list election. They need not represent any particular sector. The party list system enables Filipinos belonging to the marginalized and underrepresented sectors, organizations, and parties, and who lack well-defined political constituencies, which is what we discussed earlier. Like your group may not have a constituent in a particular district, but there's enough of you from different places that could vote for one person to be represented in Congress. This ruling will end the masquerading of well-off party-list representatives as wallowing in poverty. So that's the justification in the ruling in Atong Paglaom. It is enough that their principal advocacy pertains to the special interests and concerns of their sector. National parties need not be sectoral, need not be marginalized and underrepresented, but are lacking well-defined political constituencies. Regional need not be sectoral, need not be marginalized and underrepresented, but it must be lacking well-defined political constituencies. For sectoral, marginalized and you could be a marginalized or underrepresented sector, or a sector that lacks well-defined political constituencies. So it could be professionals, it could be law school professors or law students. So if you want to form a sectoral party list, you can, even if you're not actually marginalized or underrepresented. Atong Paglaom addressed when major political parties participate in the party list system. Major political parties not fielding district representatives can participate in party lists as national or regional parties. If you're already represented through your district representatives, you no longer need to participate in the party list. But major political parties fielding district representatives can participate in party lists, and but they must participate and register through their sectoral wing, and must have its own constitution, bylaws, platform, or program of government, officers and members, a majority of whom must belong to the sector. And the sectoral wing is independent of the major political party but linked.